Okay, we want to get to 100% renewables, right? So let's go. My daughter is a really excellent cake baker. To bake cakes, she follows a recipe. Here's a recipe for 100% renewables. It's 1 part renewable electricity, 1 part electrifying transportation, and 1 part electrifying heating. This isn't complicated, okay? When you're talking to city council people, you may not need too much more than this. But it's a little bit more than that. We want to be efficient about it, low cost, and reliable. For me personally, we talked about what our goals were, our overarching goal, and that's that everybody on the planet gets our energy lifestyle through 100% renewables. We're leaving nobody behind with this one. Everything else we've ever done has left people behind. There's no reason why we can't do this. In fact, there's lots of reasons why we can't. Let's talk about the money. That's what you hear a lot of things on this. I actually believe, and we have modeling to support some of this, that we can actually get to 100% electricity, not the transportation or heat, below current cost by 2035. If we want to go faster, it'll cost more. I don't know the exact number here, but it might be like a penny more per kilowatt hour. In Colorado, we average about 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So we can move things up by paying a little bit more, or pay a little bit more, and we can move things up even further. Just the US. How many people think that this might actually be true? How many people hope it would be true? Okay, here's why. Wind, new wind power, new wind electricity in the United States is cheaper than any other form of power. Okay? New solar power is going to beat wind power costs in the next couple of years. Very soon. Well, why? And here's the answer. This sounds a little different, but it's not. This is the same thing. These make the same amount of electricity. One large coal-fired power plant or natural gas-fired power plant over the course of the year makes the same electricity as 425 wind turbines in Colorado. That makes about the same amount of electricity as 13 million solar panels, all making the same amount of electricity over the course of a year. The coal-fired power plant or the gas plant, that's like copying the Bible by hand. The wind turbines, that's like printing the Bible on a Gutenberg printing press. And well, the solar panels, that's like printing on high-speed presses. There are no examples that I have been able to come up with where competition and mass production, competition means free markets, and mass production always means that costs go down. I can't find an exception to that. You know what? I'm going to take questions at the end because otherwise I will not get through. Leslie said, here's this long list of things I want you to get through. And I said, great, you'll give me an hour. And she said, 20 minutes. So I will take questions. I'll be around for the rest of the time. And you have my way to contact me on this. So every time, competition works. Free markets work. There's one more piece of this, and I think everybody understands that we're going to need some way to store the power because wind and solar is variable. The wind doesn't shine the sun doesn't shine all the time. The wind doesn't blow all the time, right? And that may be batteries. And what I'll point out is where we need millions and millions of solar panels, we'll need billions of batteries just for electric vehicles. And that's going to drive the price down. In fact, in California, this is a little bit geeky, and I won't explain this, but if you have a question about it, ask me later. In 2015, there was a bid that was put out, and they compared new battery storage against peaking gas plants. And the batteries won. That's historic, and that's because the prices come down. Okay, some of you are graphically oriented, you like graphs and numbers, and some of you don't. Somebody talked about talking to your audience. You've got to figure out which people are. This is the same thing I just said graphically. This is the history of 1990 to 2014 of the electricity price for solar and for wind. You can tell, and then what we did is we took this area and we blew it up. So here's 2002 to 2014. It's pretty obvious that solar is going to cross wind's price in the next couple of years. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. And what's more is we know over time the cost of generation of electricity. This isn't the cost of the turbines, this is the cost of the electricity, what we care about. And the retail residential, they've been going up. No matter what you do, sooner or later those are going to cross. And in fact, they crossed, in both cases, they've crossed in much of the country. And these slides, I'm happy to, if you email me and say, send me the slides, I'll send you these slides. No problem. Okay, back to your recipe. Let's talk about reliability. Reliability means keeping the lights on, right? That makes sense. This is essential. Electricity is our lifeblood. We really can't afford in our society not to have electricity all the time. And the question is, how do we manage these variable renewables? And there are three ways. The first way is electricity storage. That's like batteries or pumped hydro or some other way to store the energy. I think everybody understands that. I don't think I need to talk anymore about that. There's a second way, which is to distribute them around, and the third way is to manage the load. So let's talk about distributing them around. There's a map of the United States. It's kind of hard to hear, but here's Florida, and here's Maine, and here's Washington, and whatever it is, Meridian. The more you spread out renewables, the less variable they turn out to be. In fact, here's my example right here. Here's Colorado, and here's Wyoming. I have a study that shows this, by the way. Almost everything I say, I have study or analysis for. I don't make up things very often. Every now and again. Not very often. Okay. When the wind is blowing in Wyoming, it's probably, good chance, not blowing very much or not blowing at all in Colorado. And when it's blowing in Colorado, it's the other way around. It's probably not blowing over here. So if we put a transmission line between the two of these, we're not going to have nearly as much variability in our wind power. Okay? That's distributing them around. The larger we distribute things around, the less variability there is. If we add in solar, which has a different generation profile than wind, I'll tell you, I can guarantee you that there's almost no solar power at night. But there's often wind power. And in the wintertime, when the panels on my roof are covered with snow, like they are today, the wind's probably blowing pretty good in Colorado. They work well together. So that's distributing them around. The other way is to manage the load. So let's suppose that I had an electric dryer, and Xcel Energy said, you know what, we have a lot of activity on our generation system. I'll pay you 50 cents to do your laundry, to do your drying a little bit later tonight. I wouldn't do it. 50 cents? Oh, come on. I'd just rather dry my clothes right now. If they offered me $5 to dry my clothes tomorrow, oh, I'm more interested now. That got to be a different level. That's what you do when you manage load. You offer things for people. Either you charge them more to use less electricity right now, or you charge them less to use more electricity right now. We'll get into that in a minute. Okay, how do we know these things that we're saying? And the answer is, in God we trust, and everybody else had better bring data and modeling. And we actually have data and modeling. And this was the big thing. If the different things that Boulder, if we look back in history of what Boulder has accomplished, it's because of the modeling that the citizens did. That's more important than all the rest of the political pieces to put together, honestly. Because it's allowed us to say with assurance that we can get to high levels of renewables. This is what the modeling looks like. I'm not going to explain what's going on here exactly. That was 0, this is 10%, 20% renewables, 30% renewables, 40% renewables, and 50% renewables. Give me a longer talk, I'll talk longer. Fortunately, I don't have to. Okay? EnergyShouldBe.org is my nonprofit. What we do is we create short videos and we put them up on YouTube, and we encourage people to watch them about energy. They go from audiences that are very consumer level to quite technical. In the more technical end of things is modeling. If you go to the website, you'll see there's a tab called Delve, like delve deeper, and that'll take you to a page where it talks about modeling. In fact, it talks about a model that came from the modeling that the citizens in Boulder did back in 2010 and 2011 that you can download for free and do your own modeling. It has actual wind and solar data in it, and load data, how much electricity we need, and it gives you ways to tune things up. There's also a 13-minute video that you can watch that tells you how to use the model. Okay, all free.
Well, thank you.
There. While I'm talking about energyshouldbe.org, I have a monthly free, no spam, no advertising newsletter, Energy Should Be News. I took out the demonstration. I think I took out the demonstration. Oh, no, I didn't. This is what they look like, okay? Energy Should Be News. It'll say moving to 100%. It'll have a title, a link. Maybe it'll have a few sentences. Every now and again, I get really excited and I'll write a couple paragraphs and then give you the link to it. Let me read you a couple of these titles. I love this title. This is one of my favorite titles. Japan, hot springs, geothermal, harmony. Wind integration getting easier. Modeling 100% renewables, Japan-China supergrid. The real policy option, quote unquote. This is a modeling topic, and I actually rate the links. So a G, that's like a general audience. A PG, that's like pretty geeky. And VG, this one's VG, very geeky. Okay? So you have an idea as to whether you really want to take and dive into this one. You don't want to start here, okay? Start with one of the G's. Subscribe here. Please write clearly because I have to be able to understand what it is that you're writing and copy on that. Moving right along. What the data tells us is that variability is really not the big problem with renewable energy. And we go to lots of renewable energy. It's having too much electricity at one time. And like Mae West said, too much of a good thing can be wonderful. Okay, so if you are selling shoes and you have too many of them and you're in a free market environment, what do? You put them on sale, right? You reduce the price. And that's what's going to happen with electricity. Now, how many people own electric vehicles? How many people have test-driven an electric vehicle? Those of you who haven't, you owe it to yourself. You're going to drive the future. Go test drive a Nissan Leaf. If you can, go test drive a Tesla. They're wonderful, fun cars to test drive. I can't afford one, but a Leaf, we own one. Wonderful, wonderful car. No, it's not going to drive us to Santa Fe. That's not a good choice for Santa Fe. Tesla Model S, that'll take you to Santa Fe. As far as that goes. But they're wonderful fun to drive. And this is the thing that I think people miss when a lot of people that are in this work miss is not that, yes, we need to motivate people with the climate change story, but we don't want to beat them up with it. What we want to do is say, this isn't just as good, it's better. If you want to get a bunch of people excited about something, you don't say, this is really going to be hard on you, and you have to give up this. You say, this is going to be better. Honestly, electric vehicles, they're better. They're much better. Here's one reason why they're better. When we charge up in our home, I have another question for you. Let me take a drink first. How many people here really love to go to the gas station? Wait a minute. Nobody really loves the noxious fumes in the morning? You like going to the gas station?
It's cheap.
It's cheap. Cheaper than water right now. Buying water, that's true. It's not as cheap as charging up your electric vehicle, though. We pay for our electric vehicle to excel on a regular residential rate about $1 a gallon equivalent. Can anybody buy gasoline at $1 a gallon? Nope. Okay. When the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, I think that we're going to be able to charge our electric vehicle for 25 cents a gallon equivalent. Okay? Because that's what you do when you have too much of a good thing. You lower the price. Okay. One of the key questions that we kept asking in Boulder is just how much solar can we put on the roofs in Boulder? Because honestly, yeah, it's good for Pueblo that Excel just built a huge solar farm down in Pueblo, but it's really not very good for the people of Boulder. Okay? It's not really good for the open space or the farmland or the ranch land that was once there. How much can we put on the city of Boulder? Not just any old solar, good solar. We want high yield solar. So if it's shaded, we don't want to count that. And it turns out that if you take LiDAR data, that's a way to get very accurate data of altitude, and assessor data and graphics information system data that the city already had, with a bunch of NREL elfin magic, you can get the answer to that. How much really good solar can you get? The answer is 550 megawatts in the city of Boulder. That'll generate about 55% of our annual electricity. That is stunning, just on the roofs in good solar in Boulder. This is extremely accurate data. It looks like this. This is the entire city. This is a couple blocks. Let's zoom in on just a couple houses. The bright dots, that's good solar. The not bright dots are bad solar. These are actual footprints of buildings. The LiDAR actually sees the trees, so it can generate information on the shading. Extremely accurate number. Now, one of the things you can ask for is point out, you can get this from mattduell.com. There's a variety of different cities that have done this. You can ask your city if they have LiDAR data, and you can ask them to do this analysis if they do have the LiDAR data. Even if they don't, they can do a more basic analysis for that. It's a good thing to know. But honestly, how many people think that Golden is really a lot different than Boulder? It's not. Okay? We can probably get pretty close to the estimate just by taking the population of Boulder and the population of Golden and adjusting. That'll come pretty close. If we get further south, their solar is better. So those of you that are from Pueblo, you can still do the same population thing, but gosh, you can also take and just say, it's just going to be better. The answer is a lot on just the rooftops. Okay. I don't think that the biggest problem is technical or cost. I think it's a free market problem. Is it okay if I go a few minutes over my 20 minutes?
Yes, yes, please do.
Okay.
We're here on until 12:30 and then it's lunch, so.
Perfect. I think it's a free market problem. Now, this is the road to my house. It is not owned by monopoly. Okay? The reason it's not owned by monopoly is because it's a really bad idea. If FedEx owned my road, then I'd only be able to take deliveries from FedEx. It makes no sense to do that. It's anti-competitive. That limits freedom. If we allow a corporation to own the road, they set the market. Roads are what are called a natural monopoly. We let our governments own the roads, just to avoid this competition issue. It doesn't make any sense to have two roads going to my house, one owned by FedEx and one owned by UPS. That'd be silly, right? So we make it so that it's a free market on that road. How are wires different? I got to step back and do one technical slide. Here it is. It's not very complicated. There are three parts that make up an electric utility: generation, transmission, and distribution. That's it. Oh, okay, there's some other little parts too. They're not important. Generation, that's making electricity. Transmission, that's moving it potentially thousands of miles efficiently. And distribution, that's low voltage stuff. That's the stuff that comes to your door. That's what gets the electricity from the high voltage stuff. We wouldn't want this high voltage stuff in our neighborhoods. Oh, you know, you don't want to be anywhere near. That's why they put them up on tall towers. You don't want to be near that stuff, okay? This stuff, you know, you can be a lot closer. It can be, 10 feet up. It's okay. And safe that way. Generation, transmission, and distribution. These two are natural monopolies. It makes no sense to duplicate the wires. No sense at all. Generation, I think, is something different. Now, what do we have right now? Most of us are under Excel. We have monopoly. Excel owns all of this. We have coal from them for 50 years. 2069 is when their plan is to retire Comanche 3. And big, recent coal and gas investments. That's the wrong thing. If you're trying to get to renewables, that's the wrong thing. Right? Okay. No competition means no innovation or it's badly done. Here's an example of that. Some of you may have heard about Excel being excitedly talking about the smart grid in Boulder. It was supposed to cost $10 million. It cost $40 million. The reason is because they were burying some of the fiber optic cables they were using. And you're going to be really surprised about this. When they were digging, they ran into boulders. Okay. Anybody that's an Excel customer, you paid for that experiment. You paid for them to wire up half the city when they probably should have wired up 1/100th of the city. No competition means no reason to keep rates low. We've had 5 rate increases in 7 years. It's probably up from that. Here's the key problem. when Excel makes profit, they don't make it on sales like most companies do. And they don't make it on their costs, linemen and fuel purchases, those are costs. That's not how they make money. The way they make their profit is by making big capital investments like power plants or transmission lines. And when they make those big capital investments, they get their money back plus a guaranteed profit. That's why they're interested in building big iron, big generators, because that's how they make their profit. That is called the regulatory compact. And I think the regulatory compact, it's time for it to go, along with slavery and anti-freedom.
Slavery and what else?
Not that I'm too pejorative about this. Okay, what should we have? Okay, it's energy should be. What should we have? Competitive generation, based on free market rules. Anybody can play. Nonprofit transmission. That means that the transmission system is run by a board of directors that's a nonprofit entity. They're not trying to make a profit. And distribution that's run locally. Those of you that have been thinking or following Boulder will recognize that that's exactly what Boulder is trying to do. Are there other places that are working towards this or that are there now? And the answer is in the state of California. Generation is fully competitive, or increasingly fully competitive. Transmission is run by a nonprofit entity, and they have ways to get to locally run distribution systems that we don't have in Colorado. In Texas, the great bastion of progressive thinking, they have competitive generation and have for a while now. They have a nonprofit transmission system. They have a few locally run distribution systems. Institute of Local Self-Reliance. If you are really into this stuff, Institute for Local Self-Reliance. That's a kind of freedom, right? Then you might want to go to ilsr.org and subscribe to John Farrell's email list. They definitely are on board with all three of these. Reforming the energy vision is what's going on by the governor of New York in New York State. They have competitive generation to some degree. They have transmission that's nonprofit. To do what they want, they pretty well are going to have locally run distribution. Let's focus in on Texas just a second, because there's a really wonderful example there. Okay, what do these cities and counties have in common? Burlington, Aspen, Palo Alto, Jefferson County, Washington State, Georgetown, Texas, Marin and Sonoma counties.
100% renewables.
100% renewable energy, that's right. But they own or control their own distribution system, their transmission is nonprofit, and their generation is competitive, and they're 100% renewable right now, or they will be very soon. Let's focus in on Texas, Georgetown, Texas. And the reason is because it's rock-bed conservative. It was all about the money. Oh, okay, they're a Muni Electric. That means like Estes Park, they own and control their own distribution system, and they contract or own their own generation. In the case of Georgetown, Texas, they were totally in contracts. And about 3 years ago, they knew their contracts were coming up in about 2 years, and they said, what's the cheapest electricity we can get? And they said, well, surprisingly enough, it's not 100% renewable, it's 200% renewables. They own twice as much generation capacity as they need in wind and solar. It's a free market in Texas for the excess generation that they have. They're going to sell it most of the time, and the very few hours when they need to buy from the system, they'll just use the money that they raised the rest of the time. Their electric rate is 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So is Estes Park's. Okay? Most of us pay 12.5 cents in the state. Colorado, those that are on Excel anyway. They think not only that they're going to keep their 9 cents, they can keep it for 20 years. And that's because when you buy a contract for wind and solar, it doesn't go up. Okay? You already know what the electricity is going to cost. And so they think they can hold the line. Maybe they'll have a little bit of cost for inflation on this. So let's review here. We've got a recipe. We know that competition and mass production guarantees that this is going to be cheaper than that. It's not a question of whether it's going to happen. It's guaranteed. We know that modeling gives us the information that we need. We know that there's a heck of a lot of renewables out there on our roofs that we ought to take advantage of first. We know that roads are a natural monopoly, that we got to change what we're doing, go to competitive generation and nonprofits that control transmission and distribution. We know that there are examples of communities that are doing it, and they're all locally controlled. Every single one of them. It was the cities and the counties by themselves that decided to go to 100% renewables. Now look, what we do at Energy Should Be is videos. I have 14 videos up there. I talked a little bit about them. We have a total of about 76,000 views around the world. It's amazing what the web can do with this. Some of these are pretty geeky videos. Some of these are pretty consumer level in terms of doing that. Go check them out. You'll find some that you like on that. Now look, how many people remember Amendment 37 in 2004? It was passed by the voters. It was the first in the country passed by the voters renewable energy standard. All of the renewables that you see in Colorado came, almost all, came from Amendment 37. See this gal here? This is what she looks like now. I don't want to stand there in another 10 years and say, I didn't do everything I could. I'm doing everything I can. I'll help you. Okay? Contact me. Thank you.